Hi guys, I'm continuing with today's 5:30 and we're doing California. So in summary, we've reached this part, like we're at the new century, 1900s. It says here, many buildings in San Francisco damaged by the 1906 quake. Some were reduced to rubble. The morning of April 18, 1906 was not a quiet one as usual. San Franciscans awoke to find their city in chaos. A violent earthquake shook them from their beds, toppled buildings, and left gaping holes in the streets. Gas mains ruptured, stoves toppled, broken power lines sparked, and fires soon raged throughout the city. The fires burned for 3 full days and were difficult to combat because the water supply was also disrupted. By the time the dust had settled, as many as 3,000 people had been killed and 200,000 were homeless. Scientists had studied recordings of the 1906 seismic waves. They estimate the earthquake had a magnitude about 7.9. This was one of the worst natural disasters in history. But San Franciscans soon rebuilt their city. In 1915, they showed off their recovery by hosting the Panama Pacific Exposition, a spectacular World's Fair. Traveling the roadways. Once Route 66 opened in 1926, let me see. The most rural west was suddenly more accessible from the densely populated Midwest and Northeast. Soon cars full of families moved to California, and trucks full of goods, including many military supplies, covered the highway. In California, freeways and bridges were springing up everywhere to accommodate all the traffic created by these new residents and industries. The larger the cities, such as Los Angeles and San Francisco, were soon full of branching and encircling networks of roads and bridges. By the beginning of the 21st century, roads and highways were so crowded with automobiles that the government encouraged carpooling and use of trains, buses, and other public transportation. Within just 30 years, California's population would grow from 1.5 million to 5.7 million. Was the place to be. Hollywood, here I come. Imagine life without TV or movies. In the very early 1900s, people were just starting to experiment with moving pictures. Soon the country fell in love with watching films. The 1920s through the 40s is called the Golden Age of Hollywood. Here shown Shirley Temple, black golden girl. People just loved her blonde curls. She tap danced her way into America's heart. 1928, born in Santa Monica, became one of the most famous child stars, and she appeared in dozens of films in the 30s and 40s. She was paired with stars such as Bojangles, Dale Robinson, Gary Cooper, Carol Lombard. Then she married businessman Charles Eldon Black, became involved in politics. Richard Nixon, president, appointed her as delegate to the United Nations. She served as U.S. ambassador to countries of Ghana and Czechoslovakia. And the link here, it's a book called Shirley Temple Black, Child Star and Diplomat by Jean Blashfield Black, printed Chicago, 2000. A family from Oklahoma shares tight and temporary quarters in a migrant camp in California. I mean, if you're going to migrate to a new place, there's always difficulties, you know. These people expect it it's so easy. It says, how big is the famous Hollywood sign? The sign is 450 feet long, and each letter is 45 feet high. Erected in 1923 as an advertisement for real estate development, the sign originally said Hollywood Land. I think that was better than just Hollywood. Hollywood Land sounds much cuter. Companies such as MGM, Universal, Warner Brothers opened movie studios in Hollywood, and other opened movie studios in Hollywood and other Southern California locations, MGM, Universal, and Warner Brothers. They found sunny skies for year-round filming as well as lots of interesting scenery for background. Okay, then. The Dust Bowl. In the mid-1930s, a drought struck America's Great Plains. The ground was parched. As winds blew, huge dust storms swirled across the plains, creating the conditions called the Dust Bowl. To make things worse, it struck during the Great Depression, the worst worldwide economic crisis of the modern era. It began in late 1929 and lasted until 1939. Lines of people waiting for free food could be seen everywhere. Thousands of farm families piled their cars high with household goods and struck out in a vast migration to California. There's only so much California can take. I mean, just because everybody migrated from the east and came here, and by some miracle, California is supposed to support all these endless streams of people. I mean, resources run out eventually, and if you got so many people going in. Okay. For them, California had become lands of their dreams. Fortunately, many people, life was no better there. The weather was good, but there was not enough jobs for everyone. They often were unable to find work, and lived in deplorable conditions in migrant camps. World War II, 1939 to 45, helped pull the state out of the Depression. Industry boomed as California became a center for making aircraft, ships, and weapons. Many military training bases opened in California too. After Japan attacked the U.S. Naval Base in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii on 1941, in December 7, the United States entered the war. Public fear about attacks from outside and within the U.S. was high. In California, many minorities, including Japanese and Mexican people of descent, sometimes became scapegoats. Japanese Americans near the West Coast lost their property and liberty when the federal government sent them to internment camps. However, from these camps, 33,000 Japanese Americans volunteered to serve in the armed forces. One family sent 9 sons to fight for their country. The Army's 442nd Gopher Broke Division was the most decorated unit, with 18,143 awards. Many Japanese Americans served in this unit. Internment camps were places where large groups of people are confined, usually during a war. Norman Yoshio Mineta, from the camps to the Congress. Norman Yoshio Mineta, born in 1931, was born in San Jose to Japanese immigrant parents. When he was 10, he and his family were sent to an internment camp near Cody, Wyoming. While he was there, Mineta was a Boy Scout. Alan K. Simpson, the future U.S. Senator, visited the camp and introduced the idea of a political career to the boy, and that is exactly the path he followed. As San Jose's mayor, 71 to 74, Mineta was the first Asian American mayor of a major U.S. city. He served in the U.S. House of Representatives from 75 to 95 and was the U.S. Secretary of Commerce 2000 and 2001 and Secretary of Transportation 2001 to 2006. Zoot suits had high-waisted pants and long jackets. Riots and lawsuits. Wartime hysteria targeted people who looked different. In 1940 in L.A., many young Mexican-American men wore zoot suits, high-waisted baggy pants, and long suits with broad shoulders. The style was easily recognizable in the summer of '43 when a group of angry U.S. servicemen spotted some young men in zoot suits. Violence erupted. The soldiers attacked them, and soon the police were also beating and arresting young men in these suits. The Mexican-American community responded, and the zoot suit riots continued for a week, highlighting the discrimination and intolerance suffered by Mexican-Americans. There was a different type of fight in Orange County in '44. To keep Mexican and Mexican-American children out of certain public schools, some school districts redrew their boundary lines. When Gonzalo and Felicita Mendez tried to enroll their children in Main Street School, the school district told them their children had to attend a different school. The Mendezes sued the school for segregating their children and won. This case set the stage for the landmark Kansas desegregation case, Brown versus Board of Education, in which the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that segregation U.S. public schools was illegal. Suburbs and strikes. After the war, many military and defense industry workers decided to stay in California. Smaller cities soon became bustling urban centers. Wide open spaces were made into sprawling suburbs. And newly built freeways connected them with the cities. Drive-ins, supermarkets, and shopping malls sprang up everywhere. At the same time, surfers pursued a laid-back, sun-loving lifestyle on California beaches. In the early 60s, teenagers all over the nation listened to the Beach Boys singing Surfin' USA, reinforced the idea that California was the best place to be in the country. In agricultural areas, many farms relied on Mexican and Filipino workers. These low-paid migrant laborers moved from one region to another as each crop was ready for harvesting. These workers banded together to form unions. They organized strikes and boycotts, demanding that growers provide safer working conditions and higher wages. Strikes are organized refusals to work. Boycotts are refusals usually planned by a group to buy certain products or use certain services. So boycotts are mainly focused on certain products and services, and strikes are refusal to work for some reason or another. And Cesar Chavez united for a cause. Cesar Chavez's family lost their farm in Arizona during the Depression. They headed to California to work as produce pickers. Chavez, born 1927, went to 27 schools because his family was always traveling to get work. As a union leader, he led peaceful protest marches. He spoke in fields, at schools, and to government leaders, and the union he co-founded grew stronger. In 1965, it merged with another union to become the United Farm Workers Association, and it continues to champion farm workers' rights. Today, his birthday is celebrated as a holiday in California. A struggle for equal rights. During the 60s, racial tensions increased. The Watts district of LA was a working-class African-American neighborhood. Residents were angry about police brutality, high unemployment, and the underfunded schools. Tempers boiled over in 65, and riots broke out. Fights and fires raged for 6 days. So throughout the nation, African Americans and Hispanic Americans fought for fair treatment and civil rights, forming organizations that led protests, held boycotts, and lobbied for legislation. March 391, white police officers pulled over Rodney King, an African American, after a high-speed chase. Rather than ticket or arrest King for speeding and failing to pull over, 4 officers assaulted King in the street. A bystander videotaped King laying on the ground while the officers beat him. King later pressed charges, bringing the 4 officers to trial. A year later, the officers accused in the case were found not guilty. The verdict enraged the African American community in LA. People who were already frustrated by poverty and lack of services, it led to riots in the city and that claimed the lives of 54 people and cost $1 billion in property damage. $1 billion. Here is shown Vietnam War protesters taking to the streets of San Francisco on April 15, 1967. The march ended with a peace rally. In the 60s and 70s, students across the country were protesting U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. In many ways, California played a key role in the war. It was the home of most of the nation's defense contractors, companies that built airplanes, ships, and weapons. It also housed principal military centers from which troops were trained and sent to Vietnam, and it was the scene of anti-draft protests. Massive anti-war demonstrations took place on the UC Berkeley campus. For young men, one way to make a statement against the war was to burn their draft card. This was a card that male U.S. citizens received from the Selective Service System when they registered for the military draft. Young men who refused to join the military when drafted were called draft resistors. In 1965, there were 380 prosecutions of draft resistors. 3 years later, that number had reached 3,305. This was a time when many people questioned authority. A number of young people who came to be known as hippies were urging peace and love. They spoke out against industry, the media, the military, and the government, which they called the man, Big Brother, and the establishment. San Francisco's High-Ashbury district became a famous hangout for hippies. Their mottos were heard everywhere, from "Love is all you need," and "All we are saying is give peace a chance," to "Don't trust anyone over 30. Okay. Tom Bradley. Mr. Mayor. Tom Bradley, born 1917, was once quoted for saying, "The only thing that will stop you from fulfilling your dreams is you." The first African-American mayor, African-American mayor of a major U.S. city, Bradley impressed people with the way he handled some big challenges. During his time as LA mayor, his city hosted the 1984 Summer Olympic Games. Working to reduce pollution, he pushed to improve public transportation. Bradley also kept the city under control during the '92 riots, sparked by police incident involving motorists. Link is www.lausd.k12.ca.us/Tom Bradley, Tom_Bradley, underscore capital E, capital L, / capital T, capital B, so Brad bio .html. So lausd.k12.ca.us/tom_Big E Big L/Big T and then bradbio.html. Okay. Let's pause here. We'll continue in the next part. Thank you guys. My page is www.facebook.com/yosallplay, YOSALLPLAY. This is California. 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 California.